Just related to Israel that have a great impact on end times. And I'm going to try to, I realize I have a lot too much here, so, the rest of it you can just have for fun. And anytime you want to look through these things, they're good. Does anybody need pages 5 through 21? I have 3 copies of pages 5 through 21. Going twice? You do? Okay. Also, I have color copies of the chart. If you've got like a black and white and you'd rather just have a color. I noticed some black and white copies going around. What? I don't think so. Okay, because I've got too much. Let's do 2 things. Let's do Daniel 9:27, and let's think just briefly about Ezekiel 38 and 39, the battle of Gog and Magog, because both of these impact. And again, you can say anything you want or ask whatever questions. We've been talking though about the covenant structure, right? Abrahamic covenant, that's everlasting covenant. Okay, Mosaic covenant, that's what they needed to. It's temporary. It's temporal. It's just given for a period of time until Messiah comes, okay? And he would fulfill it. But while they lived under that rule of life, not a way of salvation, but a rule of life, if they obeyed, they enjoyed blessing. If they disobeyed, they would be disciplined. There were 5 degrees. By the time you get to Daniel, they've already been in the 5th degree. And Leviticus said, when you're in that condition, you're out there in captivity, and you pray and you confess your sin, I will remember my covenant that I made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he'll remember the Abrahamic covenant. Okay? So that's what we're seeing here in Daniel 9. Daniel is saying, we've been in captivity 70 years. The land is almost 70 years. The land is almost done making up for its Sabbaths that we didn't regard. And so the Lord is going to restore us. If we confess, if we come before him. And that's what he's doing in verses 3 through 19. He's confessing. Okay? Then in the middle of that prayer, we come to verse 20. And he's requesting in verse 9, oh Lord, forgive our nation. Okay, take action. Okay, do it for your own sake. That's a great prayer. Do this for your own reputation, Lord. Okay. Now, he says, verse 20, while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God in behalf of the holy mountain of my God. And for Jerusalem, he says, while I was still speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering. He gave me instruction. He talked with me. He said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you insight with understanding. At the beginning of your supplications, the command was issued, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. So give heed to the message and gain understanding of the vision. Well, here's what Gabriel tells him. Okay, 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, number 1, to make an end of sin, number 2, to make atonement for iniquity, number 3, to bring in everlasting righteousness, number 4, to seal up vision and prophecy, number 5, and to anoint the most holy place, number 6. 70 weeks are decreed for those 6 things to take place. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, that's the beginning of the 70 weeks, a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again, the city, with Plaza and Moat, even in times of distress. And then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. He will have nothing. The people of the prince who's to come, they will destroy the city and the sanctuary, the temple. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war. Desolations are determined. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes a horror, who causes horror, that makes desolate. Okay, so this is what Gabriel revealed, right? 70 weeks, okay, 70 shavuim, okay? That's the Hebrew for weeks. But it's like the term dozen. You've heard this? You've been through this? The term is not, it doesn't tell us what the unit is. In other words, let's say weeks is a bad translation. Because it's like me saying, I'm going to the store and I'll get a dozen. A dozen what? My kid said eggs. I said, no, I was going to get donuts. See, because it could be a dozen of whatever, The word just means sevens, plural. 77s. And you say 77s of what? Like, are decreed. Well, from the context in verse 2, Daniel was thinking of years, right? He was reading Jeremiah. It said, you'll be, the desolations of Jerusalem will be 70 years. So in context, Daniel's thinking in terms of years. Gabriel just said, it's going to be 77s. 77s of what? Well, what Daniel was thinking about. Years, okay? There was no need to say years because Daniel knew he was talking about years, right? And therefore, they're not going to be restored in 2 years like Daniel hoped, right? But they're going to be restored in 490 years. So because you have 70 sevens, 77 groups of 70, right? Which is 490 years, okay? And then the angel tells him what's going to happen and when this 77s will begin. Verse 25, you're to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's why I put 7 and 62, okay, which is a total of 69, right? And it says it will be built again with Plaza and Moat, even in times of distress. So whenever Jerusalem, the decree to rebuild Jerusalem with Plaza and Moat, okay? Meaning it's a defensible city. The Moat, it was a cut in the dirt. We think of one, castle with water. Okay, they didn't have the water, but they had these deep cuts that they would make in the ground, which would make it very hard. An enemy army has to go down in that cut, and then the walls were, and like, how are we going to, it's a defensive structure. So as a fortress city, whenever Jerusalem is decreed to be rebuilt as a fortress city, there's lots of decrees, to rebuild Jerusalem or rebuild the altar and stuff like that happen, but only one that is to build it as a fortress city, and that was issued in the year 444 BC. We're not going to go into details. Okay, it was issued by Artaxerxes Longimanus IV, okay, that they could go and rebuild, and they did, and they were under distress because they kept having people say, well, you're building a fortress city, which would mean you're proclaiming your independence, okay, from whoever's kingdom you're in. And they got all this strife and difficulty during the time. So it took them 7 sevens, okay, which is 49 years, to get it all rebuilt, okay. Then there's another 62 sevens, and then it says the Messiah, the Prince, after that will be cut off. Okay, after the 62 sevens, Messiah will be cut off, but not within the 1 7. So it's after the 69th, and before the 70th. So there's a gap. Here's another gap theory I believe in. Okay, because it's in verse 26, it says a gap. After the 62 weeks, not during, after. Who will be cut off? Messiah. What does that mean? Cut off. Death. Okay? So we know that's talking about crucifixion. Ultimately, we know that. He'll have nothing, meaning no kingdom, at that time. And the people of the prince who's to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, after Jesus' crucifixion? The Romans, okay? 70 AD, right? Started in 66 at Caesarea, all this stuff. It goes on, it's finally over in 73 at Masada, right? I mean, they killed them all. It's a great place to go. All these places are great places to go. So, after the 62 weeks, which is the 69th, because you already had the 7, Messiah's crucified, okay? And then Jerusalem is destroyed, and its end will come. It will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war, desolation. So it's a whole period of war. Okay, so there's a gap between the 69th and 70th week, and then we come to the 70th week, the 1 week, okay, the 1 7 in verse 27. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. And everybody says, well, who's he? So we go to verse 26, right? And we have the people of the prince who is to come. Okay, well, the people who came, that's the Romans. And this is the prince who's to come from that people. So he's Roman prince. We call this guy, okay, the Antichrist. Okay, we'll have some time devoted to him later. Okay, This is the guy who comes, and verse 27 actually doesn't say he's going to make a firm covenant. It says he's going to impose a covenant on the Jewish people, and specifically the leadership. The many are the leadership. You know, people don't make treaties with the average Israeli. They make treaties with the leadership, which is in the Knesset, right? In Israel. That's their parliamentary type system. Okay? So he's going to impose a covenant, which is a treaty, like a national treaty, with the leadership of Israel for 1/7. That's 7 years, right? 1/7? 7 years? It's just 7 years. But in the middle of the 7 years, he's going to put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. See, that presupposes there's got to be a what standing there if you're going to be offering sacrifices. There's got to be some kind of temple, altar. All this has to be there, okay? And then on the wing of abominations is going to come one who makes desolate, okay? Okay, and that's him, okay? He's the desolator. He's going to change everything. He comes in, I'm going to make this treaty. I can protect you. When is Israel... Okay, they have like really good like military. I don't know if you know, but they're the Israeli. I know I'm being sarcastic. You know, the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. I mean, the top of their game as far as intelligence and all of that. They make great weapons. I mean, they fought wars for 75 years now. Okay, and every time the Arabs try to destroy them, let's say the Muslims try to destroy them, since that would be more politically incorrect. Every time the Muslims try to defeat them, somehow the Druze miraculously come out of it. I mean, in 73, the Yom Kippur War, when Golda Meir was prime minister, I mean, they almost got, they got shocked by this. But they dug their way out of it, and they won that war. It is remarkable to the point that I listened to an Islamic girl who was attending Oxford. She was probably 25 to 30 years of age at Oxford, and she says, because 5 wars have been waged by the Muslim peoples against Israel, and the Israelis have won every time, I'm convinced that Allah is not God. It's because it's so obvious, okay? But for Islam, war is ongoing. It's an everlasting war. That people group, they come from the brother of Isaac, right, Ishmael, and they come from Esau. And Ishmael, it said, would be a wild donkey. He would fight everyone. He would fight his brothers. He'd fight everybody around him. And that's the mindset of this people group that descend from them. From them, it's ongoing conflict since 1917, okay, and really 48. But when the British took the land, because the Turks owned it before, right? They had the land of Israel. When the British defeated them in World War I, from an Islamic standpoint, your mind is saying, Allah lost. And Allah is God. Allah is sovereign. So Allah can't lose. Anything that has ever belonged to Allah is to forever belong to Allah in Islam. So they have been at war to get this place back for over 100 years. And by the way, that's nothing for people of this mentality to wage war for hundreds of years. We say, we want to get in this war, we want to get out of this war. That's American mindset. Finish the war. Their mindset is, we don't care if it takes centuries. We're going to win. Maybe it's going to be because we breed so many suicide bombers and soldiers that, we just outbreed everybody and take over the planet. Whatever. This is the mindset. Okay? And we don't understand that mindset. Okay? But for Israel, they've been at war with Israel since 1948. This is the worst thing that could have ever happened. Okay, in a way, this is a tragedy. Though there's rumors I could go on. There's rumors that in 1933, Hitler met with the Palestinian Authority leader at the time. There's no really Palestinian Authority, but let's just call him that for the sake of it. But had these meetings, and the plan was ultimately to bring all the Jews to the land of Israel so they could blow them up and just destroy them with a nuclear bomb. That was one of the original plans that Hitler conceived. If we can't beat them in Europe, but we can't do all this, we'll send them to the land of Israel as a backup plan, and then we'll just demolish them all in one place. What did they do the day they declared their independence in 1948? 5 Arab armies invaded. They had 2 airplanes in Israel and some guns from Czechoslovakia. That's about it. And they won. Okay? And so remarkable things have happened over there. God's put them back in the land. We're getting ready for this 70th 7, okay? Because the first 69 have transpired. Now all that's left is this 1 week. Somebody's got to come along and make or impose a covenant on them, okay? They can't, if this guy is promising them peace or safety, security, Israel's going to have to be in a condition where they're afraid. Right now, do we have their back? You wonder. Like, where are we? What's going on? What if someone turned against Israel? Would we be there? I mean, I go over there. You just have shirts. Every little T-shirt shop, every tourist shop all over have Israeli over here and American over here, and we'd have our planes, on the shirt. And they love America, because we got their back. But what happens when nobody has their back? See, that has to happen. And this is in progress, okay? So it relates to Bible prophecy. So this guy will make this covenant 7 years. He'll break it in the midpoint. So somewhere, here again, somewhere a temple has to be in the making. They've been talking about this as the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. You can go there. It's in the old city. It's called the Temple Institute. They got a website and everything. You can go look at it. They've built a menorah. They've got a line of priests that they're training out in the wilderness. I mean, these people, back in the 80s, they tried to go up there and take the Temple Mount. You probably remember. It caused quite a stir at the time. It's the temple movement in the land of Israel among certain Jews. Okay, not everybody. Most of the Jews over there, leave it alone. Let the Muslim Waqf, the police, the Muslim Waqf control the Temple Mount. And they do. If you go over there today, you'll go up on top and, you'll have these guys wearing little headphones walking around following your group around. You're told not to pray, not to take a Bible. They'll take your Bible right away from you. You'll never see it again. That stuff's not permitted up there, okay? Because the Muslim Waqf has been given sovereignty over the surface of the Temple Mount, even though it's under Jewish territory sovereignty. They've said, okay, you guys control it. Because it's too combustible a place. I mean, the place is ready to explode. You remember when Ariel Sharon went up there in 2001? Oh, my goodness. I mean, the whole thing, it was riots all over the city. I mean, it's a mess, okay? So they say, just let them control it, okay? But at some point, that Dome of the Rock has to be removed. It has to, because the Jews are not going to go with the theories of these, kind of goofball wingnut archaeologists that say, well, that's not really the Temple Mount. The real Temple Mount was over here, over the the spring over here, the Gihon Spring, okay, which is kind of like south and a little bit, it's pretty much south of the Temple Mount today. And Bob Cornuke and others who have come up with this idea that that's not really the Temple Mount. So we can leave the Dome of the Rock there, and they're going to build it over here. I'm saying, right next door? You really think that's going to work? I don't think that's going to work at all. So it's just a politically correct attempt at a solution. And I don't know any rabbinic Jews who've ever said, we think that's a great idea. No, they say, this is the Temple Mount. Okay, and this is where we're going to build our temple. And the rock underneath the Dome of the Rock, there's a rock there, right? That rock is where the Ark of the Covenant rested inside Solomon's temple. And it is. I know there's alternate locations, but I've looked at this for years. Okay, Lane Rittmeyer is the authority. He and all the archaeological stuff is up there. They've only found it there. They didn't find it over there on the Gihon Spring. So this is the place. Okay, and this has to be built there. And you say, well, how is it going to be built there? And the only thing I ever heard every time I went to Israel is, somebody's going to, a rocket's going to go awry or something. Rockets don't have, guidance systems anyway, right? That's what missiles. So rockets are just kind of, whatever. Hope we get close or hope we hit them. And maybe it'll hit the Dome of the Rock and that'll be it, But here's my theory, okay? There's a couple guys in the book of Revelation that are really neat guys. Revelation 11. You know what two guys I'm talking about? They're called the two witnesses, right? Okay. Now, what happens if you want to kill them or you want to harm them in any way? What do? Yeah, they just breathe fire on you, turn into toast. That's what it says. It says if anybody wants to, not if they try, want. It's a lust. He says they must die by fire coming out of their mouth. That's really interesting. Sounds like, these guys are like human bazookas. Really cool. So let's say these guys, and the thing is that that chapter talks about the temple. It's the one chapter in Revelation that talks about the temple. 11 verses 1 and 2. And it says it's measured, and the outside is given to the Gentiles, but the inner court is preserved for the Jewish people and for sacrifice. And then it talks about the 2 witnesses. And these are the 2 olive branches, and you go back to Zechariah and you find out what all is going on. What's going on is these 2 guys are going to protect the temple area and allow for the rebuilding and the offering of sacrifices. That's how it's going to be rebuilt. Anybody wants to stop it? You get the fire. You get the torch. So lots of theories, but this is my theory based on Revelation 11. At the midpoint, what happens to those 2 guys? Antichrist kills them. Okay, their bodies lay dead in the streets for 3.5 days. The whole world has a party, right? They celebrate like it's Christmas. It says they give gifts to one another. Okay, finally we got rid of these people. The Antichrist goes into the temple himself, right? He sets himself up as being God. Okay, commits the abomination of desolation, puts an idol of himself up in the temple, and the false prophet and him demand that the whole world worship him. Okay, and then he says everybody has to take the mark. If you want to buy anything, you want to sell anything, if you want to engage in commerce, you have to take the mark. And if you don't have the mark, you can't make a purchase. You can't sell anything. You're basically not allowed to live. Okay? So that's what the background of all of that is coming right here out of Daniel 9:27. He's going to put a stop to sacrifice, and then he's going to commit the abomination of desolation. Jesus said it too. So Matthew 25 or 24, Jesus believed the Bible. Isaiah says he got up every morning and his father taught him in his humanity. He learned the scriptures. And he believed Daniel and he read it in his humanity. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus said, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, this is this idol that's set up. Let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. This is the event that tells the Jewish people in the land, they better get the hell out of Dodge. Because if they don't, they're going to be destroyed. They're going to be annihilated. Okay? He hates the Jewish people. The Antichrist will hate the Jewish people because when he is cast out of heaven, and all this is on your chronology, but when there's a war in heaven, right in the dead center at the top of your chronology. Okay? Satan is cast out of heaven. Okay? He can no longer accuse the brethren, right? He's cast out of heaven to earth. What does he do? Well, the Antichrist is killed. He counterfeits the resurrection. He indwells the Antichrist right at the midpoint. The Antichrist then kills the 2 witnesses, and that's when the whole world's attention is then directed toward the Antichrist to worship him. And he commits that abomination of desolation. That's what Jesus is talking about. And he says, this is when the Jewish time of difficulty is going to come. If you look on your chart, your chronology, all this is the tribulation, the 70th week of Daniel. They're in the middle. And I put that in red kind of underneath the period. Here, yeah. So you can see that this whole period right here, from here to here, is the 70th week of Daniel. It's 7 years. Okay? The midpoint right there, war in heaven. Satan indwells the Antichrist. Okay? All that kind of stuff. So the first half is what Daniel 9 is saying. He's going to impose this treaty, and they're going to have 3.5 years of geopolitical peace. Okay? Because he's going to keep the covenant, the treaty. But then he's going to break it at the midpoint, right? When he commits the abomination of desolation and all that. And then the last 3.5 years are going to be persecution of the Jewish people. That's why Jesus is saying you gotta flee, okay? You gotta get out of Dodge. So let's look at Matthew. We're here in Matthew 24. We might as well do it. You can see that on my chart. Right here, I put the beginning of birth pangs, not the end. Matthew 24, 4-8. And then the Great Tribulation, near the end, Matthew 24, 9-26. Okay, let me explain how this is called the Olivet Discourse, right? This is one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible. It's elaborating Daniel 9:27. The whole chapter is an elaboration of one verse in Daniel 9. That's all it is. It starts in verses 1-3, and the apostles, they have some questions, right? They want to know about the temple. They're walking away. They're looking at the temple and how beautiful it is. Herod and all his renovations of the temple. It was an awesome thing. Okay? And they're marveling at it. And in verse 2, he said to them as he watches them, "Do you not see all these things, the temple? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another which will not be torn down." And of course, he's talking about what's going to happen in Daniel 9:26. He's talking about the temple being destroyed by the Romans. Saying, deal with it. Now, the Temple Mount is a giant retaining wall. It's humongous retaining wall. It's something like 13 acres, okay, on a retaining wall. Because the rock comes up and it's right under the dome of the rock. That's the only portion of the real mountain that you can actually see. The rest of it is fill. And the western wall, you look at that thing, it's like, wow. But if you go to the east side, it's even more wow. You wouldn't want to jump off there. It's a long way down. So that Temple, they're looking up there, and these buildings were built on top of that retaining wall by Herod. And they're marveling, and he says, hey, all that's going to be thrown down. And it was. All those stones were thrown off the top of that retaining wall. Verse 3, he's sitting on the Mount of Olives now. They walked across. From the Mount of Olives, you can see, you're looking right at the Temple Mount. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Except for all the tombs. There's thousands of tombs there now. The disciples came to him privately. They said, tell us, when are these things going to happen, and what's going to be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Really, it's two questions. And Luke answers the first one, and Matthew answers the second one. What will be the sign of your coming, even the end of the age? So his coming and the end of the age are the same time, and there's a sign. And that's what they want to know. What's the sign that this is the end of the age? Jews only knew 2 ages. Okay, they only knew 2 ages. The age up to Messiah's kingdom and Messiah's kingdom. That's all they know. Okay, so that's how we interpret them. They want to know, when is the end of this age leading up to Messiah? So that we can know when Messiah will reign as in his kingdom. That's their question. He answered to, and see, look, here he goes. See that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name. Okay, a lot of antichrists, okay, saying I am the Christ. There's not going to be just one come. There's going to be a lot. And they will mislead many. Mislead is the key word in this whole section. It's deception, deception, deception throughout. Okay, it's the key word. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. You're going to hear about this in the land. You'll hear about all these wars going on. Don't be afraid. Those things have to take place, but guess what? That's not yet the end, okay? Okay? That's what they asked in verse 3, right? They said, we want to know when the end is. He says, this is not the end. This is the birth pangs, verse 7 and 8. He says, nation will rise against nation. It's an explanation. Kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. They're not signaling the end yet. Now, I know people do a lot of stuff with this, World War I, World War II, all this stuff. And no. And I'll show you why. It's real easy why. Okay? Verse 34 tells us. Verse 34 says, the generation that sees these things will not pass away. Okay? Well, there ain't nobody left from World War I. This is not what it's saying. It's talking only about the 70th week of Daniel. If you go into Revelation 6, where it's the first 6 seals, and you go back in here and you look in these first 4 verses here, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8, guess what you find? These are the sealed judgments. That's what this is describing. These are the seals. It's the same thing. So, verses 4 to 8 are the first half of the tribulation. Okay? They're the first half of the tribulation. Not many people hold this view, but Dwight Pentecost held this view. I presented at the pre-trib like 3 years ago. This is the first half. Now, but it's not the end. It's the beginning of the birth pangs. Let me ask you a question. Do the birth pangs start when a woman has her birth pangs? Okay, in Hebrew idea, this is the idea that she's having the pangs that give birth to the baby. They end. That's where they end. The birth pangs will not end until you have the baby. You know when you start having the birth pangs, right, ladies? You know. Sometimes a little false start or whatever, but like the next day, here you go, or something like that. This is the whole concept of when this stuff starts. it's not going to stop until it's all over. What's the baby? What's going to be born out of this whole period of history? The thing that's born is called the kingdom. It's the baby, okay? So when these birth pangs start, they're going to keep getting more and more difficult, just like they happen and it does in a pregnancy, and then the kingdom will be born. It happens very compact right at the end of the pregnancy. You've got 9 months or so, right? Right at the end, within one day, usually, those birth pangs take place, and it eventually takes you all the way to the end. And it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and then you have the baby, and the baby's so wonderful, you forget all that, right? Eventually. That's the kingdom. See, it's so great. You and I and everybody on the planet will forget about all that. Because it's like that baby. Okay, so this is the first half. Now, in verse 9, look what happens. Then, tate. Okay, signal of sequential movement. Then they, the Antichrists of that time, who are deception. Okay, and by this time he will have arisen. Okay, the one. They will deliver you to tribulation and kill you and be hated by all nations because of my name. You will be hated. Who are the people who are going to be delivered to tribulation, who are going to be hated in that time? This isn't that complicated. It's the Jewish people, right? So verse 9 is the very middle of the tribulation. We just saw Satan is cast out of heaven. The Antichrist is killed. He comes and dwell the Antichrist, right? And then he goes off to destroy the Jews. Okay, that happens all at the midpoint. So this is the midpoint. And you say, but I thought verse 15 was the midpoint. Here's the abomination of desolation. No, verse 15 is an application. See, therefore, he's going to go back and he's going to make an application. So don't worry about that yet, okay? Watch what happens in verses 9 to 14. They will deliver you to tribulation. They'll kill you. You'll be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will fall away, many Jews, and they will betray one another. They will hate one another. There's going to be division in the Jewish people, okay? Many false prophets will arise. They will mislead many. There's the word again, mislead. Deception, mislead is the key word of this whole section. Okay? Because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. It's going to be a very difficult time for the Jewish people. But he says, but the one who endures to the end, he'll be saved. Okay, that's not talking about spiritual salvation. It's talking about physical deliverance. The Messiah will save you, like come in, destroy the Antichrist, and take you into the kingdom. That's what this is talking about. This gospel of the kingdom, the good news of the kingdom that will be born, see, shall be preached in the whole world. That's the globe, folks. As a testimony to all the nations. And if you go to Revelation 14, who preaches this? Well, you've got the 144,000, you've got the 2 witnesses, but then you have this angel who takes the good news, the gospel of the kingdom, over the whole planet. Is an angel going to do it? You say that can't happen? Yeah, it will happen. God said so. And then what? At the end of verse 14. Then the end will come. That's what they wanted to know, right? Verse 3. What's the end? What's the sign? That it's the end. Verse 14 is the end. See, that's the end of the tribulation. So verses 4 to 8, the first half, 9 to 14 is the second half. And then he starts to make an application. Okay, so he's told them the whole tribulation. He's told them the whole 7 years. First half, Antichrist, wars, rumors of wars, that's all the seals and stuff like that. Then here comes the midpoint in verse 9, and the Jews are hated and everybody, and they're going to try to kill them, and it's going to be frustrating for Jews in the land as they disagree with one another. But who's Messiah? I don't know. And all this stuff and breaking up families and so forth. But then verse 15, he makes an application then. He says, all right, here's the key, guys. When you see the abomination of desolation, okay, the Antichrist, right, he goes in there and he does this. Daniel taught us this, he says. Then you must flee to the mountains. If you're on the housetops, don't go down and get stuff in your house. If you're in the field, don't go back and get your cloak. Okay? If you're pregnant, that's not good. Okay? That's going to be a tough situation for you. Pray that your flight's not in the winter. Pray that it's not on a Sabbath. Because then there's going to be great tribulation. Okay, that's the second half. The second half is the great tribulation. It starts with the abomination of desolation. Okay, it's the most difficult time in the history of the world. Okay, 3 passages talk about this and say it's unparalleled. Okay, there can only be one unparalleled time of difficulty in history. And that's this 3.5 years, the last 3.5 years. He says, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. And unless those days had been cut short. In other words, limited in duration to just the 3.5 years. No life would have been saved. In other words, everybody would have been dead. See, but for the sake of the elect, okay, the Jewish people and the covenant God made with them, those days will be cut short. Then if anybody says to you, hey, here's the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe him. Okay, why shouldn't I believe him? He says, because false Christs and false prophets are going to arise. They're going to show great signs and wonders. And you read Revelation 13 and you say, the Antichrist and the false prophet, they're going to make a statue speak. They're going to make it come alive and speak. And you say, what? How could a statue, some stone, speak? I don't know. But that's what it says is going to happen. These are great, great signs and wonders. They're all counterfeits. They're satanic miracles. You say Satan can't do miracles. Yeah, Satan can do miracles. Okay? They're counterfeit miracles, but he can do miracles. Okay? They're not the true thing. It's like the pharaohs, and remember Pharaoh, and he had his sorcerers and magicians, and they did some of the same stuff, and then it got to a point they couldn't do it, remember? Oh yeah. Satanism is alive and well in this world. Some of those red-hooded monks in Tibet that levitate, totally satanic. Satanic miracles. They're happening today. Great, great signs and wonders, so as to mislead. There's the key word. There it is again. Same Greek word. Key word. So as to mislead, if possible, even the elect, the Jewish people. Behold, I've told you in advance. See, something that's more certain than signs is the word of God. It doesn't matter what we see or experience. What matters is, what does this text say? He says, I told you in advance. You're going to see this stuff. It's fake. Don't go for it, he says. So if they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, don't go out there. Behold, he's in the inner rooms, don't believe them. Go look at the Messiah, he's over here. No. That's not the way it's going to happen. He doesn't come like that. That's what this is talking about. When he comes, everybody will know. There will be no mistake. And he describes it. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, how fast does lightning come from the east to the west? It's like that. This is why Jesus said in John 17, I said this Wednesday night, the passage where it says, the kingdom of God is within you, that is always misinterpreted almost 1,000% of the time. Okay, he's talking to the Pharisees. If the kingdom of God is within the Pharisees, we got some real problems, folks, because the Pharisees didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. They were of their father, the evil one, John 8:44. They worshiped Satan. If the kingdom is in the people that worship Satan, we have some serious issues in the Bible. Okay? That's not what it's talking about. What Jesus is talking about is that the kingdom, when it comes, is just going to be in your midst. It's that fast. It's just going to drop. That's what the word means. Boom! And that's it. Okay? And that's when it's just like lightning. Okay? Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. I mean, it's just quick. But then now he describes the situation, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So the picture is that immediately after the 7-year tribulation, immediately after, there's a blackout. Okay, the whole world will go into pitch black, like the darkness of Egypt. Okay? And then, verse 30, then the sign. This is what they asked about, right? Verse 3. What is the sign of your coming in the end of this age preceding Messiah and his kingdom? Here's the sign. The sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And you say, well, you didn't tell us what it was. Okay, hold on. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. So either the Son himself is the sign, or the sign is the Shekinah glory, a bright light. Because Zechariah 14 says it will be a unique day. There will never be a day like it. It will be dark, and then there will be light. Piercing light. So it's worth holding your place and just to see the identical passage in Zechariah 14. And then I'll stop. 14:6. Remember, darkness on that day And then suddenly, light. Zechariah 14:6. In that day, there will be no light. The luminaries will dwindle, for it will be a unique day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night. See, it's because it's like the darkness of Egypt. It's not a normal night. Okay? But it will come about that at evening time, there will be light. That's the sign. It's probably Shekinah glory. Shekinah glory announced the first coming of the Messiah when he went to and sat over the house in Bethlehem, the light, what they call the star. This is Shekinah glory. And Shekinah glory will announce the second coming of Jesus Christ against a black backdrop. And then every eye will see him. Okay? All right. So, that's the 490 years. Then, everything that Daniel spoke of in verse 24 will have transpired. Okay? They'll anoint the most holy place. The sin will be done with. Okay? All of that. Okay? The temple will be rebuilt, and we'll go into the kingdom. Okay? All right. Let's see. What else? What questions or whatever do you have? Oh, let me mention 2434 because somebody had a question on 2434. This is a favorite of preterists, okay, that say that all this happened in AD 70. Okay, this is already passed. Okay, AD 70. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Okay, they say, see, Jesus was talking to the apostles. The apostles were standing there on the Mount of Olives with him. The generation of the apostles couldn't pass away until all the things in Matthew 24 took place. No, it's the generation that sees all these things. Okay, I mean, I want to be respectful, but that's not. These things didn't happen in chapter 24. None of this stuff happened. So Jesus is talking about the generation that sees these things, the actual generation of Israel that sees these things. Look at the verse 32, the parable of the fig tree. This is what he wants us all to learn from this. Okay, now he's speaking to Israel, of course, you know, the apostles in Israel. But look at the parable that he wants to learn from this whole story. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. Okay, so they knew the growing patterns, right, in the land of Israel. They knew, hey, look, we know the same thing around Spokane. You see little buds, you go, oh, I know what time of year it is, you know. They knew that. So you've got this fig tree. It starts putting off tender shoots and the leaves. You say, oh, summer's close. Summer's close. Okay. He says, so you too, when you see all these things, well, what things? Well, all the things in Matthew 24, you know. Many false Christs, wars and rumors of wars, the beginning of the birth pangs, you know, Israel being turned against, okay, and hated by all nations, okay. And then someone commits an abomination of desolation in a temple. He says, when you see all these things, you know that he's near. He's right at the door. Second coming is close, see. He says, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Again, this is the generation that sees all these things. This isn't the first century. So that's the parable of the fig tree. Okay. People said for a long time when Israel was established as a nation in 1948 that Israel is the fig tree. That's how they interpret the fig tree. Israel's not the fig tree. It's just an illustration. A fig tree is a fig tree. Always has been, always will be. So they started date setting. They said, well, one generation is 40 years. You remember all this? They said 1948, add 40 years, 1988. The second coming of Jesus Christ is going to be in 1988, so we back that up 7 years to find 1981 is the year of the rapture. 1981 came, and 1981 went. Okay? 1988 came, and 1988 went. They recalculated. Oh, we got that wrong. Now generation's this long, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, it's all just games, okay? The truth is you don't know. You're not going to know. And we're not supposed to be looking for that anyway. We can see stage-setting events, right? But what we're really looking for is what we'll talk about next. We're looking for Jesus Christ. That's what we're looking for. And that's what we're told to wait for expectantly. Him. not the Antichrist, not all that stuff. We don't look to the Antichrist. We look to Jesus Christ. Okay? There's only one view that holds to looking to Christ, and that's pre-trib rapture. It's the only view. Every other view is going to try to identify the Antichrist first. Have to, because he comes first. So why not look for him? Okay? But in reality, the only practical one is looking for Christ, looking at Christ, and that's pre-trib rapture. Okay, we'll talk about that next. Let's have some lunch. Let me pray. I'll pray for lunch, or let me ask somebody. Ken, can you pray for lunch for us all? Sure. Y'all have heard me enough.